Welcome, dear listener, to another quiet journey through time with the sleepy historian. If you're here for some boring history for sleep, or if you simply enjoy falling asleep to calm bedtime storytelling, soft-spoken history documentaries, or slow stories of the ancient world, you're in the right place. Tonight, we'll gently explore the vast, strange, and oddly comforting world of Greek mythology, not in haste or with excitement, but slowly, with a yawn tucked between every tale. This video is crafted for those who find peace in history sleep stories, who enjoy relaxing history to fall asleep to, and who appreciate the soothing rhythm of calm narration. Fans of Roman ruins, dusty scrolls, quiet gods, and forgotten temples, this one's for you. Before we drift too far into myth and memory, if this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, falling asleep to the same ancient tales under the same quiet stars. So now get comfortable. Let the room dim. Let the world outside fall away. Imagine yourself wrapped in soft linen beneath olive trees, the Aegean breeze whispering through leaves as a lyre plays somewhere in the distance. You can almost hear it. The slow rhythm of sandals over marble, of voices reciting epics by firelight. Tonight's story begins at the very beginning with chaos. From there, we'll meet gods with thunder in their hands and monsters in their shadows. We'll hear the quiet desperation of mortals, the defiance of heroes, the loneliness of immortality, but always gently, always slowly, always sleepily. So breathe deep, let go, and prepare for stories older than memory. This is not just mythology. This is bedtime relaxation through myth. Calm bedtime storytelling for a tired soul. No drama, no rush, no god shouting from mountains. Just soft-spoken tales from an ancient world, carried to you in the quiet of night. Let the myths unfold. Let the legends drift like fog across the sea. Let's begin. Imagine, if you will, a time before time. A quiet darkness that stretched in every direction, endless and unformed. This was chaos. Not chaos in the sense of noise or confusion, but rather a vast, yawning nothingness. A void without wind, without light, without time. It had no purpose, no movement, no shape. It simply was. From this primeval emptiness, the first things began to stir, as if the universe exhaled a slow breath. Emerging from the depth of chaos was Gaia, the earth, solid and strong. She was not created. She did not arrive. She simply appeared, ancient, patient, and calm. With her came Tartarus, the deep abyss beneath all things, darker even than chaos, a kind of forgotten echo at the bottom of existence. Not far behind followed Eros, a gentle but persistent force, the embodiment of desire, the soft pull that draws one being to another. Eros would become essential for the acts of creation that followed. Though in these early moments, he too drifted like mist, unshaped and wordless. Nyx, the night, soon rose, cloaking all in a calm, cool velvet, while her twin, Erebus, the darkness of the space between earth and sky, embraced her. Together, they blanketed creation with quiet so profound that it was almost comforting. And from Gaia, the earth, more beings came forth. She birthed Uranus, the sky, whose broad dome arched protectively above her. The two became partners in shaping the young cosmos. With every breath, Gaia gave rise to mountains and rivers. With every glance, Uranus painted the heavens and stars. Their union brought forth children, the mighty Titans, immense and slow-moving, their footsteps like distant thunder. There were 12 of them, each a presence of enduring stillness. Among them Cronus, the youngest, would grow to become the most infamous. The sky, Uranus, however, feared the power of his children, Each time Gaia bore a new titan, Uranus would force them back into her depths, into the belly of the earth itself. This caused Gaia great pain. In time, she grew weary of the burden and the silence. She devised a plan. She whispered to her children, and only Cronus, quiet and brooding, agreed to act. She crafted for him a curved blade of flint. One evening, as Uranus stretched across the sky, Cronus emerged from Gaia's body and used the blade to strike his father. Uranus recoiled, and the heavens groaned. From this act, the sky was separated from the earth for good. Out of the remnants of Uranus's fall came new beings, strange, quiet creatures. The Furies, spirits of vengeance, and the giants, immense and still like mountain ranges. From the foam where Uranus's essence touched the sea, Aphrodite would later rise. But not yet. The sea, for now, remained undisturbed. With Uranus gone, Cronus took power. He ruled over the Titans with a firm and steady hand. Time passed, though there was not yet time as we know it. Just the rhythm of Gaia's breath, the slow movement of stars, the patient growth of roots. But even as Cronus brought a kind of calm to the world, an ancient warning whispered from Gaia's lips. You, too, will be overthrown by your own child. Cronus, haunted by this echo of fate, took precautions, and thus began a new story, one of fear, of swallowed futures, and of the first Olympians. For now, the world sat in a kind of hushed expectancy. The Titans ruled, vast and eternal, while beneath the soil and sea, newer forces began to stir. Creation was no longer a chaotic whisper. It was a lullaby, a beginning. After the fall of Uranus, Cronus stood tall among the Titans, his curved blade now buried beneath the soil as if the past had been tucked away, neat and silent. His siblings watched in quiet awe. The sky no longer pressed upon the earth, and for the first time, the world breathed freely. It was a calm dominion, timeless, heavy, and deliberate. Cronus took Rhea, his sister, as his partner. She, like Gaia before her, was nurturing, still, and watchful. Together, they ushered in a new age, the Golden Age, it would later be called, a time when mortals had not yet emerged, and the earth provided all without need for toil. Trees bore fruit without effort. Rivers ran clear and gentle, and the sky knew no storms. Time moved like honey down a stone, slow, steady, unmeasured. But Cronus, for all his power, could not forget the prophecy. Gaia's whisper echoed in his mind. You, too, shall be overthrown by your own child. Fear settled in his heart like dust on a forgotten scroll. So, when Rhea gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Hestia, Cronus took the infant in his arms, looked into her peaceful face, and swallowed her whole. He did the same with the next child, Demeter, and the next, Hera, and then Hades, and then Poseidon. Rhea, silent and horrified, watched each child vanish down the throat of time. Cronus told himself this was the only way to preserve the peace, to ensure his reign endured, untouched by fate. When Rhea became pregnant a sixth time, she could bear no more. Desperate, she sought guidance from Gaia and Uranus, who had once again found their voices in the winds and stones. Together, they devised a plan. When her labor came, Rhea traveled in secret to the island of Crete. There, hidden in a cave on the slopes of Mount Ida, she gave birth to a son, Zeus. The infant cried softly, his voice echoing like a distant bird call. Rhea wrapped him in swaddling cloth, kissed his forehead, and gave Cronus a stone wrapped in blankets. The Titan, unsuspecting and tired of prophecies, swallowed the stone. Zeus was raised in secret by the nymphs of the forest and fed on the milk of the divine goat, Amalthea. Some say bees brought him honey in golden drops. The young god grew strong, but not in a hurry. His childhood was quiet, full of still mornings, rustling leaves, and the sound of trickling streams. There was no rush. Power grows in silence. When Zeus came of age, he returned, calm, composed, and with purpose, with the help of Métis, the wise Titanus. He offered Cronus a drink laced with a special mixture. It was not violent. Cronus simply drank, then bent low with unease, and began to bring forth the children he had swallowed, fully grown and unharmed. First came Hestia, then Demeter, then Hera, followed by Hades and Poseidon. One by one, they stepped out, blinking at the light, taking the world anew. The old order had shifted. The calm surface of Cronus's rule had been broken, like ripples in still water. The Titanomachy, the great war between the Titans and the Olympians, was about to begin, but not yet. For now, Zeus and his siblings gathered in the shadows of Mount Olympus. The wind carried their names like lullabies: Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera. They did not seek revenge, only a rightful place in the story. The stars turned. The earth held its breath. In the shadowy folds of Mount Olympus, a quiet gathering unfolded. Zeus stood at the center, his brothers and sisters around him, each reborn into the light after years in their father's belly. Their breaths were even. No swords clanged, no battle cries rose. Not yet. The world held a soft tension, like a breeze that might stir a storm or simply pass by. The Titanomachy, the great war between Titans and Olympians, would come. But it would not arrive with fireworks or bloody ground, at least not in the way poets might later describe. It was a struggle of slow attrition, of whispered strategy, and long stretches of eerie quiet punctuated by deep, thunderous shifts in the earth. The Titans ruled from Mount Othrys, a towering range to the south. Cronus, still regal though shaken, called upon his siblings and loyal followers, Iapetus, Hyperion, Ceus, and others, to prepare. Their power was immense, yet rooted in the old order, heavy, ancient, and deliberate. Meanwhile, on Olympus, the younger gods gathered their strength. Zeus, with thunder in his bones but serenity on his brow, led not with rage, but with quiet certainty. His brother Hades, ruler of shadows, moved like a shadow himself, silent and calculated. Poseidon, the sea's heir, carried the weight of deep waters in his gaze. Hera, proud and composed, offered more than mere counsel. And Demeter, gentle and firm, stood with the wisdom of harvests and cycles. The world between these two mountains became a suspended canvas. The wind carried not just leaves but plans. Rivers ran thick with anticipation. And slowly, over 10 long years, the battle unfolded. It was not endless chaos. It was organized silence punctuated by outbursts of divine force. Zeus released the Cenomans and the Cyclopes, ancient beings imprisoned by Cronus in the depths of Tartarus. These were not gentle creatures. The Cenomans had 100 arms and 50 heads each, though in this version of the story, they moved more like wind-blown trees than monsters. The Cyclopes, one-eyed and forge-bound, brought gifts not of war but of balance. To Zeus, they gave a thunderbolt, a crack of light in his palm that hummed softly until called upon. To Hades, they gave the helm of invisibility, a crown of smoke and silence. To Poseidon, the trident, crafted not for violence but control, like a tuning fork for the seas. The Titans responded not with new inventions, but with sheer force. Boulders were lifted and hurled like seeds scattered on a field. Mountains shifted, valleys quaked. The earth, Gaia herself, groaned with every movement, yet did not intervene. The war lasted not because of equal strength, but because both sides hesitated. These were gods and Titans, not mortals. Their grudges were timeless, their strategies eternal. Zeus did not win by outmuscling his father. He won by outlasting him, by listening to the earth, watching the skies, and understanding the rhythms of power. He used storms not to destroy, but to wear down. His bolts did not explode. They pulsed, then faded, slowly fraying the resolve of his elders. Eventually, one by one, the Titans began to falter. Sia stumbled into a ravine and did not rise. Hyperion wept fire and vanished beneath the horizon. Iapetus fell with a sigh, as if finally allowed to rest. Cronus, too, was not defeated in a blaze of fury. He simply stopped fighting. Worn, empty, he sat on a stone at the edge of Othrys and watched the sky. Zeus approached, not with vengeance, but with resolution. He offered no words, just a gesture toward Tartarus, a deep realm beneath even the underworld, a quiet prison where time barely moved. There, Cronus and the remaining Titans were sent, not as punishment but preservation. A slow sleep in the belly of the world. The Olympians returned to Olympus. There were no celebrations, no feasts, just stillness. A new era had begun, one born not of war, but of endurance, patience, and the slow, inevitable change of seasons. And thus, the age of Zeus began, quiet, vast, and full of clouds. By now, the Olympian order was established. The sky had its ruler, the seas their guardian, and the underworld its silent king. The earth, lush, alive, and ever turning, belonged to no god in particular, but to one figure, tall and thoughtful. It held special meaning. Prometheus, a Titan not imprisoned with the rest, walked the world not as a rebel, but as a quiet observer. He was not feared, nor was he followed. He was simply there, among rivers, forests, and the small flickering lights of early mankind. The humans of this time were simple creatures. They built shelters from branches and bone, not yet knowing the rhythms of agriculture or the secrets of the stars. They huddled for warmth, but their nights were long and cold, lit only by moonlight and instinct. They feared the dark, and they feared the gods, those distant powers in the sky who offered no warmth in return. Prometheus watched them, not with pity, but with curiosity. He admired their resilience, their stubbornness. They were clumsy, yes, but they were also potential wrapped in skin. Their hearts beat like drums, soft, steady, hopeful, and so he made a decision. Not loud, not sudden, just a choice. He would give them fire. It sounds simple now, but in that age, fire was no common gift. It belonged to the gods, an essence of power and illumination, held closely within Olympus. Fire was more than warmth. It was thought. It was rebellion. It was knowledge in flame form. Prometheus approached Olympus not in defiance, but with patience. He waited until the gods feasted, distracted by nectar and stories of their own grandeur. There, in the corner of the great hall, nestled in a bronze bowl, flickered an eternal flame, tame, bright, and whispering. He didn't steal it with chaos. No storm broke. No alarm rang. He simply cupped his hand around the smallest flicker and carried it downward, hidden in the hollow of a fennel stalk. This, he knew, would burn slowly, sheltered from the wind. A traveler's flame. Down the slopes of Olympus he came, step by step, mile by mile, until mountaintop mist gave way to rolling fields, where the earliest humans huddled in animal skins, scratching lines in the stones with no meaning. He did not speak to them. He simply offered the flame, placed it in the center of their circle, and stepped back. The fire hissed softly as it met the earth. The shadows on their faces lifted, eyes widened, hands reached forward. They didn't understand what it meant, but they felt it. From then on, fire spread, not in a roar, but a whisper. Campfires flickered across the land. Sparks danced in the dark. Smoke curled from the mouths of caves. With fire came cooking, warmth, light, but also questions, curiosity, stories around the flame. Zeus noticed, of course. The smoke reached Olympus eventually. He narrowed his eyes, not in wrath, but disappointment. Prometheus had broken no law, only tradition, and for that there would be consequences. But not yet. For now, Prometheus walked on, through villages lit by flickering embers, past children who laugh in the warm glow, through fields where tools clanked softly against stone. His gift had been received, and the world had changed. The fire Prometheus gave to mankind was not just warmth, it was awareness. With fire came change, and with change came balance, or rather, the need to restore it. Zeus, ever the keeper of celestial order, could not let the theft go unanswered, but he did not strike Prometheus down immediately. The gods, after all, did not always punish with thunder. Sometimes they punished with poetry. So Zeus devised a gift with silk-wrapped danger and beauty wrapped in breath. He ordered Hephaestus, the blacksmith of the gods, to craft a being from clay, not rough like men, but smooth, elegant. Each Olympian contributed. Aphrodite gave charm, Hermes gave cunning, Athena gave skill, and Apollo gave music. Her name was Pandora, meaning all gifted. She was not a monster, nor a villain. She was curiosity given form, soft-spoken, intelligent, kind-eyed. The gods sent her earth not with swords, but with smiles. She arrived not as a storm, but as a guest, and with her she carried a jar, or a box, as the later poets would call it, a gift sealed tightly, bound by the gods, forbidden to open. The humans received her with awe. She was unlike anything they had seen, her voice calm like river water, her steps light as falling petals. But it was a jar that drew the eyes. It was beautifully crafted, of course, with golden etchings and a lid sealed in divine wax. It made no sound, but it held a presence, like an unopened letter from a long-lost ancestor. For a time, Pandora did not touch it. Days passed in rhythm. Humans now had warmth, community, and music. The jar rested quietly in a corner, as if asleep. But at night, when the campfires crackled low and the stars blinked overhead, Pandora would look at it. She would wonder, not with greed, but with that simple ache that lives in every curious mind. What if, and one morning, without drama or storm, she opened it? There was no explosion, no scream from the heavens, just a breath, a long, slow exhale, and then silence. Out from the jar slipped shadows, thin, smoky threads that coiled and vanished before they could be grasped. Sickness, envy, greed, war, aging. They were not monsters, just whispers. They did not roar. They settled into thoughts, into bones, into breath. Mankind now had fire, but also doubt, illness, conflict. It was not punishment, truly. It was balance. Pandora slammed the lid shut, heart pounding. Her hands trembled, but it was too late. All had escaped. All but one. From the bottom of the jar, faint and flickering, came a soft light, not fire, but something gentler. A voice that did not speak, but comforted. It was hope. It rose not as a flame, but as a feather drifting upward. It did not banish the shadows, but it followed them. Always. Mankind would now suffer. Yes, they would age, hunger, quarrel. But they would also dream, rebuild, believe. And Pandora? She wept not from guilt, but understanding. She had not destroyed the world. She had simply opened it. There are moments in myth when the gods look upon the world they shaped and feel a deep disappointment. Not rage, not wrath, but a weariness that sits heavy like dusk. This was such a moment. After Prometheus' rebellion and Pandora's quiet catastrophe, the humans began to change. Not all at once, not everywhere, but slowly, subtly. Where once there was cooperation, now there was cunning. Where once there was reverence, now there was rivalry. They fought over land, over pride, over things as fleeting as words. To the gods, it felt like watching a garden overrun with thorns. And Zeus, high upon Olympus, watched longest of all. He listened to the prayers, some selfish, some cruel. He heard mortals call to him not in gratitude, but in demands. He saw temples defaced, sacred oaths broken, and kindness become currency. And then came Lycaon. A king of men, Lycaon was clever but cruel. One evening, to test whether Zeus was truly all-seeing, he served the god a meal that no human should offer, a dish made from a slaughtered guest. It was an insult, but more than that, it was proof. Proof that hubris had rooted itself deep within the hearts of mortals. Zeus stood up from the table, not in thunder, but in silence. He returned to Olympus, called a gathering of the gods, and shared his sorrow. And then he decided, the world, he said, must be cleansed, not forever, not utterly, but like a field burned to allow fresh growth. The old must be washed away, so that something gentler might rise. And so the sky wept, the rain began softly. Gentle mist like a sigh, but it did not stop. Hours passed, then days, then weeks. Rivers rose like serpents, coiling through valleys. Mountains groaned beneath torrents. Villages vanished. The earth was no longer land and water. It was only water. But not all hope was lost. Among the mortals was a man named Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, and his wife Pyrrha, a woman wise and kind-hearted. Prometheus, ever the protector of humanity, had warned his son, and so Deucalion built an ark, not grand like in other legends, but simple, sturdy, quiet. He and Pyrrha rode the waves in solitude. They did not rejoice in survival. They sat often in silence, mourning what had been lost. When the waters finally receded, their boat came to rest on Mount Parnassus. The world they stepped into was hushed, blanketed in dew and stillness. No voices, no fires, no footsteps, just the whisper of the wind and the occasional cry of a bird. They were alone, but the gods had not abandoned them. Hermes appeared, not in grandeur, but as a shepherd in mist. He told them they could repopulate the earth, but not through passion or pain. They were to cast the bones of their mother over their shoulders. It was a riddle, but Pyrrha understood. The mother was Gaia, the earth, the bones were stones. And so they walked side by side, tossing stones behind them. And where the stones of Deucalion fell, men sprang up. Where Pyrrha's stones landed, women grew. Humanity was reborn, not in fire this time, but in patience. The new humans carried no memory of the flood, but they bore the weight of its silence. They were softer, slower to anger, not perfect, but thoughtful. Zeus watched from the clouds, and for the first time in many moons, he did not frown. Imagine a world where the sky trembled, the mountains groaned, and every sunrise was uncertain. This was the age before the Olympians, a time when the earth was ruled not by graceful gods, but by immense, ancient beings known as the Titans. The Titans were not evil, nor were they gentle. They were elemental, vast, and unmoved by the concerns of mortals. The leader of these colossal figures was Cronus, son of Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. Cronus had overthrown his own father in a storm of rebellion, slicing the sky away from the earth with a sickle of stone. From that moment, he ruled time itself, measured not by minutes, but by eras and eons. Yet, for all his power, he was not without fear. You see, Cronus had been warned. One day, a child would rise to overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his own father. So, he did what frightened rulers often do. He tried to control the future. Each time his wife, Rhea, bore him a child, Cronus swallowed it whole, not in rage, but in dread. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, each one devoured at birth. Rhea wept silently, her grief swallowed with each child. But when her sixth child was born, something changed. She couldn't bear it. Not again. So Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and gave it to Cronus. He swallowed it without looking and thought himself safe. Meanwhile, the true child, a boy named Zeus, was hidden in a cave on the island of Crete, raised by nymphs and fed on the milk of a divine goat named Amalthea. Zeus grew swiftly, like a storm gathering on the horizon, and when he was grown, he did not charge into battle. He came with cunning. First, he gave Cronus a potion that caused him to vomit up the 5 siblings he had swallowed, still alive, still divine. Then, with his brothers and sisters at his side, Zeus declared war. What followed was not a skirmish. It was a cataclysm, the Titanomachy, the war between the gods and the Titans. It lasted 10 years. The skies were lit with lightning. Mountains crumbled, seas boiled. The Titans fought from the heights of Mount Othrys, while the Olympians held Mount Olympus. Neither side could gain the upper hand, until Zeus made a daring move. He descended into the darkest depth of the earth, Tartarus, and freed the Cenomanes, 100-handed giants with the strength of earthquakes, and the Cyclopes, monstrous smiths with a single eye. In gratitude, the Cyclopes gifted Zeus his thunderbolt, Poseidon his trident, and Hades his helmet of invisibility. Armed with these divine tools, the gods surged forward. Zeus hurled lightning that split the sky. Poseidon struck the ground, splitting mountains. Hades vanished into the shadows, striking fear into the Titans' hearts. In the end, the Titans fell. Cronus and many of his kin were cast into Tartarus, bound in chains that even time could not erode. The war was over. The Olympians had risen. And from that day forth, the world changed. No longer ruled by primal forces. It was shaped by personalities. The Olympians, flawed, fiery, and fascinating, took their places. Zeus became king of the sky, ruling with thunder in one hand and law in the other. Poseidon claimed the sea, vast and ever-shifting. Hades accepted the underworld, not as punishment, but as a realm all his own. Hera, Demeter, and Hestia presided over marriage, harvest, and hearth. The age of Titans had ended. The age of gods had begun. After the dust of the great war settled and the Titans had been cast into the depths of Tartarus, the newly crowned rulers of the world took their thrones upon the lofty heights of Mount Olympus. But who were these Olympians? What were their stories? Not just as powerful gods, but as beings of immense personality, quirks, contradictions, and influences that touched every corner of the ancient world. Let us begin with the one who stood at the top. Zeus, the king of the gods, was not merely a wielder of thunderbolts. He was a weaver of fate, an arbiter of justice, and, quite often, a cause of chaos. With a booming voice and a watchful eye, he presided over both divine disputes and mortal affairs. His many romantic adventures, often in disguise, sometimes as a bull, sometimes as golden rain, left a trail of demigods and legends in their wake. Beside him stood Hera, his queen and sister. She was a goddess of marriage and family, yet her own marriage was often filled with tension and jealousy. Despite this, Hera was formidable, a divine matron who fiercely protected the sanctity of vows and punished those who crossed her. Her strength was quiet but unshakable. Then came Poseidon, the god of the sea. His domain was vast and ever-changing, much like his temper. Known for stirring the oceans with his trident and shaking the earth with quakes, Poseidon was a force of both beauty and fury. Sailors offered him sacrifices before voyages, and horses were sacred to him. Gifts he was said to have created. Hades, the third brother, ruled not the sky or the sea, but the shadowy realm of the dead. Misunderstood and often feared, Hades was no villain. He maintained order in the underworld, ensuring that souls found their proper place. with his helm of invisibility. He could pass unseen, silent and solemn, a god of inevitability. Demeter, sister to the three brothers, was the goddess of agriculture and harvest. Where her feet touched, crops flourished. But when her daughter, Persephone, was taken to the underworld by Hades, Demeter's sorrow turned the earth barren. Thus began the seasons, her joy and grief reflected in the cycles of planting and reaping. Hestia, the gentlest of the Olympians, kept the hearth fires burning. She symbolized the warmth of home, the peace of family, and the sacred flame that bound communities together. Though she had no grand myths or dramatic tales, every household honored her. In stillness, she reigned. As the first generation of Olympians settled into their roles, the next wave began to emerge. Children of Zeus and other gods, each with domains of their own. Athena, born fully formed from Zeus's forehead after he swallowed her mother Metis, was a goddess of wisdom, strategy, and warcraft. She was rational, calculating, and fiercely just, clad in armor, yet ever the voice of reason. Athena was both warrior and scholar. Apollo, radiant and golden, was a god of music, prophecy, healing, and the sun. His twin sister, Artemis, was a huntress, protector of the wild and the moon. Together, they embodied balance, sun and moon, masculine and feminine, civilization and wilderness. Ares, the god of war, represented not strategy but raw violence. He was chaos on the battlefield, passionate, aggressive, and often unpopular among the other gods. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, was said to have risen from the sea foam. Her charm was irresistible, her presence intoxicating, yet her powers extended beyond romance. She could ignite war or bring peace, depending on her whims. Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge, was a craftsman of Olympus. Lame and often mocked, he created the most exquisite weapons and tools, including Zeus's thunderbolts and Achilles' armor. Finally, there was Hermes, the messenger, quick-witted and fleet-footed. He guided souls to the underworld and carried messages between gods and mortals. A trickster and a traveler, Hermes belonged everywhere and nowhere. These were the 12 Olympians. Each one a story, a symbol, a reflection of human nature writ large in divine form. They quarreled, they loved, they punished and protected. And though immortal, they were deeply, irrevocably flawed. Their tales offer the ancients explanations, entertainment, and even comfort. For if even gods could be foolish, jealous, or heartbroken, what hope had mere mortals of perfection? As we continue to the lofty halls of Mount Olympus, let's pause to explore the tales that wove the gods together, not just as forces of nature, but as characters in a sprawling, divine drama. The ancient Greeks, in their temples and marketplaces, whispered stories that weren't always flattering, but always fascinating. We begin with Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. Though married to the smith god Hephaestus, her heart, and much of the gossip on Olympus, belonged to Ares, the god of war. Their secret trysts, hidden behind clouds and beneath moonlight, were the worst-kept secret among the immortals. One day, Hephaestus, ever the craftsman, fashioned a net so fine it could not be seen. He cast it over the lovers and summoned the other gods to witness the shame. But the response was laughter. For in Olympus, the divine were not above mockery. God snickered. Hera rolled her eyes, and Poseidon, with a chuckle, offered to pay a dowry if Hephaestus would release the two. This, you see, was the way of Olympus. Vanity, betrayal, laughter, and the inevitable ripple of consequence. Meanwhile, Apollo, ever radiant, was not immune to heartache. He once fell in love with Daphne, a forest nymph. But she fled from him, terrified not of Apollo, but of love itself. As he reached for her, she cried to her father, a river god, who transformed her into a laurel tree. Her fingers became twigs, her hair leaves. Apollo stood in sorrow and declared that from then on, the laurel would be a sacred symbol. The gods were immortal. Their hearts, unfortunately, were not. Artemis, twin sister to Apollo, chose a life of solitude and vowed never to marry. She roamed the forest with her nymphs, bow in hand, protector of the wild. One day, a hunter named Actaeon stumbled upon her as she bathed in a hidden glade. Enraged by the intrusion, she transformed him into a stag, and his own hounds tore him apart, unwitting agents of their master's undoing. Even the kindest gods could be terrifying. And then there was Hermes, the ever-clever trickster. As a newborn, barely a day old, he escaped his cradle, stole Apollo's cattle, and returned without leaving a trace. When Apollo confronted him, Hermes played innocent, until he pulled out a lyre he had fashioned from a tortoise shell and sang so beautifully that Apollo forgave him. In the end, Hermes gave him the lyre as a gift, and a friendship formed. Sometimes, charm was mightier than might. Even Athena, known for her wisdom, could be ruthless. When the mortal Arachne, a weaver of astonishing skill, claimed to be better than the goddess herself, Athena challenged her to a contest. Arachne's tapestry was flawless, and full of scenes depicting the gods' many indiscretions. Though impressed, Athena was enraged by the audacity. She tore the tapestry and transformed Arachne into a spider, cursed to weave forever. Thus, even brilliance came with a price. Let us not forget Demeter and the tale of her daughter, Persephone. Hades, god of the underworld, saw her picking flowers and took her for his bride. Demeter's sorrow was so deep that the world turned barren. Mortals starved. The gods pleaded with Zeus to intervene. A compromise was reached. Persephone would spend part of the year with her mother and part with Hades. Her ascent marked spring, her descent, autumn's end. These myths, tender and cruel, wild and wise, were more than just entertainment. They were reflections of storms and heart, of longing, jealousy, pride, and the eternal push and pull between love and consequence. To the ancient Greeks, these stories explain not just nature, but human behavior. Why do we fall in love with the unattainable? Why does beauty bring rivalry? Why does grief change the world? On Mount Olympus, the gods lived as flawed reflections of us all, just with lightning and ambrosia. Now that we've wandered the cloud-brushed paths of Olympus and watched the divine dance through passion, revenge, and wisdom, we descend gently to a realm not quite mortal and not quite immortal. This is a realm of demigods, the children of both heaven and earth, walking paradoxes born from fleeting encounters between gods and men. The ancient Greeks believed that such unions created beings of extraordinary strength, bravery, or intellect, but rarely peace. These hybrid lives were rarely blessed. In fact, they were often tragic. And in that tragedy, perhaps, the Greeks saw reflections of their own fates magnified to mythic proportions. Let us begin with the most famous of them all, Hercules, better known to us by his Roman name, Hercules. Born to Alcmene, a mortal woman, and Zeus, who had taken the form of her husband, Heracles was marked from birth. Hera, ever jealous of Zeus's affairs, loathed the child. She sent 2 serpents to his cradle to kill him, but the infant Heracles strangled them with his bare hands. His life would be one of strife and trials. Hera's hatred followed him, clouding his mind in a moment of divine madness. In that fog, Heracles tragically slew his own wife and children. As punishment, and perhaps penance, he was commanded to complete 12 impossible labors. Imagine, if you will, the quiet march of a man toward redemption, one monster at a time. He fought the Nemean lion, whose golden hide no weapon could pierce. He captured the Ceryneian hind, swift and sacred to Artemis. He cleaned the Augean stables, which had not been cleaned in decades, by diverting a river with brute ingenuity. Each task was a tale of endurance and despair, not glory. Despite his feats, Hercules never found rest. Even in death, his mortal part was consumed by flame, but his divine spirit ascended to Olympus. He became a god, but not before walking a path etched with loneliness and impossible burdens. Then there was Perseus, the son of Danae and Zeus, who entered her chamber as a golden shower, an image both poetic and deeply mysterious. Raised far from kings and warriors, Perseus would become famous for slaying Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze turned men to stone. But his story is more than a monster-slaying legend. On his journey, Perseus received gifts from the gods: Hermes' winged sandals, Hades' helm of invisibility, and Athena's mirrored shield. With these, he faced the horror of Medusa, not with brute force, but cleverness. He looked not at her, but at her reflection, and struck true. In this tale, divine favor and mortal courage mingle quietly. No bellowing battle cry, just the silence of wings, a steady hand, and a breathless moment of danger overcome. And then came Theseus, prince of Athens, born of Aegeus or perhaps Poseidon, depending on the version. He journeyed to Crete, into the dark, twisting labyrinth, where the Minotaur waited, a creature born of a queen's cursed desire. With a sword in one hand and a thread in the other, Theseus entered the maze. The thread, given by Ariadne, the king's daughter, would lead him back out. In this, too, the message was subtle. Intelligence, preparation, and love matter more than mere might. Theseus slew the beast, but in the rush of triumph, he forgot to raise the white sails on his return ship. His father, watching from the cliffs, believed him dead and flung himself into the sea, which bears his name to this day, the Aegean. And then there's Achilles, a name whispered with reverence and sorrow. Born of the sea nymph Thetis and the mortal Peleus, Achilles was nearly invincible. His mother dipped him into the river Styx, holding him by the heel. That tiny spot, untouched by the water, would be his undoing. Achilles was a warrior unmatched, his anger feared by kings. But he was also tender, loving Patroclus, mourning him with a grief that moved even the gods. His death came not in glory, but through deception. An arrow from Paris, guided by Apollo, pierced his heel. In his fall, the age of heroes began to dim. These stories, whispered by candlelight and carried on the lips of poets, were never just about strength or adventure. They were about fate, about walking between worlds, about being too mortal for the gods and too divine for men. And so the demigods lived in legend, not because they conquered, but because they suffered, because they tried, because they bore burdens not meant for their shoulders, and still took another step. Imagine their stories now, settling over you like the sea breeze on a quiet Greek island, their footsteps fading into the dust of myth. As we drift onward through the dusky corridors of memory, let us pause among the great trials of the heroic age. These were not simply tales of valor, but reflections of a world grappling with chaos, with gods who seldom answer prayers, and with the burdens of destiny. These epic struggles, often doomed or ambiguous in victory, etched themselves into the soul of Greek myth. Let's return to Hercules, our tortured strongman, whose 12 labors were not merely feats of strength, but of endurance and obedience. His 5th labor took him to the Augean stables, home to thousands of untended cattle. The stench, they said, carried for miles. Hercules was ordered not just to clean them, but to do so in a single day, a task intended to humiliate him. And yet, with quiet ingenuity, he diverted 2 rivers to flood the stalls. This image, a man redirecting the course of nature itself, spoke of an age when cleverness and sheer will could bend the world. But even that wasn't enough to win him peace. He still had 7 labors left. He was sent to steal the apples of the Hesperides, guarded by a 100-headed dragon, or to bring back Cerberus, the 3-headed hound of the underworld, without using weapons. In this age, heroism meant walking straight into the impossible and coming back changed. And then there was Jason, leader of the Argonauts, whose quest of the Golden Fleece was as much about politics as it was about bravery. Jason's voyage gathered heroes from across Greece: Orpheus, Atalanta, Hercules again, and set sail aboard the Argo. They faced clashing rocks, harpies, and sorceresses. The most dangerous of all? Medea, the priestess who loved him. With her magic, Jason triumphed. He yoked fire-breathing bulls, sowed dragons' teeth into the earth to grow armed warriors, and lulled the dragon guarding the fleece to sleep. But Jason's real test came after victory. He abandoned Medea, and she, betrayed, took her revenge, not with sword or poison, but by killing their children. In the stories of old, triumph often came wrapped in sorrow. Consider also Bellerophon, who tamed Pegasus, the winged horse, and killed the Chimera, a fire-breathing monster part lion, part goat, part serpent. His success intoxicated him. He tried to fly to Mount Olympus itself, to join the gods. But Zeus sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus. Bellerophon fell, crashing back to earth, living out his days blind and alone. In Greek myth, reaching too high wasn't bravery. It was hubris. And hubris never ended well. Next, we enter the twisting saga of Theseus, whose life after the labyrinth was no less complicated. He abandoned Ariadne, the woman who had saved him, and returned to Athens alone. His later years were marked by political failures and a growing bitterness. In some versions, he even descended into Hades with Pirithous, his friend, in a failed attempt to kidnap Persephone. Only Theseus returned, barely. But perhaps the greatest epic of them all was the story of Odysseus. After the Trojan War, he wandered for 10 years, not lost, but delayed by gods and temptations. He blinded the Cyclops, escaped the sorceress Circe, visited the underworld, and tied himself to masts to hear the deadly song of the sirens. His crew ate the sacred cattle of the sun. His ship was destroyed by Zeus, and he washed ashore on Calypso's island, weary and alone. And yet, he kept going. He survived not by brute force, but by wits, lies, and resilience. He returned to Ithaca not as a conquering hero, but as a disguised beggar, reclaiming his throne quietly, surgically, with arrows and patience. These were not clean victories. Greek heroes often stumbled, suffered, and regretted. Their trials were not just external. They battled fear, guilt, and the weight of fate. And in this, they were deeply human. They didn't always win, but they endured. These struggles, retold again and again, were never just about entertainment. They were lessons in patience, in humility, in knowing when to act and when to wait. Imagine now the wind carrying the scent of sea spray from the prow of the Argo, or the heat of the underworld rising around Hercules as he approached Cerberus. The world of the heroic age was wide and unpredictable, its heroes flawed and fascinating. And yet, through it all, they left footprints so deep that we still follow them, thousands of years later. Let their stories settle now like sand in the bottom of a quiet bay, gentle and unmoving, waiting only for sleep. As you settle deeper into your rest, let us now drift through the twilight of an age, when the mighty began to fall not by monsters, but by their own hands, and the world of myth began to quiet. The golden age of heroes, once glittering with courage and strength, gave way to shadows. Shadows of arrogance, of pride unchecked, and choices made in haste. The Greek word for this fatal flaw was hubris, the act of overstepping, of believing oneself equal to the gods. And time again, hubris led even the greatest to ruin. Take Bellerophon, for example. He had defeated the fire-breathing Chimera, a beast with a lion's head, a goat's body, and a serpent's tail. Victorious and praised by kings, Bellerophon believed he deserved more, to fly to Olympus itself. He mounted his winged horse Pegasus and soared skyward, aiming to reach the home of the gods. But Zeus, unmoved by mortal pride, sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus. The horse bucked, Bellerophon fell, down to the earth. He survived, but crippled and forgotten. He wandered in shame, a silent reminder of ambition gone too far. Others fell not just to pride, but to betrayal. Jason, the hero of the Argonauts, had overcome hydras, dragons, and sirens. With Medea's help, he had claimed the Golden Fleece. But in peacetime, Jason's virtues withered. He cast aside Medea for political gain, breaking oaths sworn by blood and gods. Medea, in grief and fury, wrought a revenge so dreadful it echoed for generations. Jason's victories meant nothing in the face of such personal ruin. Then there was Achilles, peerless in battle, yet doomed by his own rage. His strength was unmatched, but his anger, once provoked, consumed all. When his companion Patroclus was slain, Achilles' wrath turned the tide of the Trojan War. But even he, the greatest of warriors, could not escape his fate. Struck in his vulnerable heel by Paris' arrow, he fell, not to an equal, but to destiny itself. These were the days when heroism gave way to tragedy, when even the noblest were torn down not by monsters, but by choices. The age of gods walking among men was ending. The world, it seemed, no longer needed heroes born of divine fire. And so, as temples crumbled and myths grew quiet, the Greeks themselves began to change. They still remembered the names, Hercules, Perseus, Odysseus, but now they told the stories with a sigh. They were bedtime tales, cautionary legends, no longer alive, but whispered as echoes. The golden thread that bound gods and mortals began to fray. The myths, once sung beneath the stars, faded into memory. A world of men rose in its place, a world of philosophy, of reason, of quiet longing for a divine past. So let your mind wander to that golden glow of stories, of shining armor and starlit seas, of winged horses and impossible mountains. Let the echoes of those final heroic days lull you into stillness. Because even as the heroes fell, their stories never truly ended. They were simply put to sleep. And now, dear listener, let us exhale gently, slowly, together. You wander through time, through starlit temples and moonlit shores, past the chaos of creation, the rise of Olympus, the loves and wars of mortal gods, the heroics and heartbreaks of mortal champions, and the soft twilight of myth's end. What began in the vast, whispering dark of chaos blossomed into a world lit by divine fire. Titans fell, gods rose, and mortals danced in the space between. From Pandora's curious hands to Prometheus' quiet rebellion, from the labors of Hercules to the fall of Troy, these stories were not just tales of glory, but of lessons, mysteries, and dreams woven into the very breath of civilization. Now, as the night settles and your mind floats gently on the tides of rest, remember, myths were never meant only to be told. They were meant to be felt like lullabies wrapped in wonder. You might not remember every god's name or every hero's fate by morning, and that's perfectly okay, because the beauty of mythology lies not in remembering, but in being carried by it, like soft waves against the shores of sleep. These ancient stories cradle us in something older than memory, something quiet and sacred. The fire may have dimmed in the temples, but here, in your dreams, Olympus still glows. If this kind of soft storytelling brings you peace, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly helps you rest. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? What time is it for you? It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, drifting into sleep with the same myths whispering through the dark. From the sleepy historian, thank you for joining this gentle journey. May your night be calm, your dreams be long, and may you always find your way through the fog of history. Now dim the lights, let the myths fold back into the silence, and let sleep carry you away. Good night.